In order to grow spiritually, we need to transform our head, our cognitive faculty, we need to develop wisdom. We need to also work on our heart, our feeling aspect, our emotional aspect. And finally, we also need to work on our will, the volitional aspect, and everything that flows from that, including strength and determination and courage. We need to work on all three. And over the last few months, we've looked at the head and the heart, and tonight we're starting to look at the final one, the will. The guts, the will, the volitional aspect, which some people might be even a bit surprised that it's there in Buddhism. I mean, surely Buddhists are supposed to just be really sort of nice and unthreatening. And not at all full-blooded, but we might find out different. Because without that aspect, we're not going to make much progress. So inner progress, changing, requires strength, it requires determination. And we don't want to just change in an inner sense either. We want to also have an impact on the world, and that takes strength, effort, determination. Virya, as it's called in Sanskrit. So yeah, we've been looking at these three aspects. Today we're launching on the will, the volitional aspect. And we've linked this theme to three traditional archetypal figures who are called the three family protectors, the three protectors of the family of the Buddha. Three figures who embody these aspects of enlightenment. Over time within Buddhism, there's several different ways in which, as it were, the qualities of enlightenment were sort of split up to sort of allow us to sort of envision them more easily. Different figures taking on particular aspects of what it means to be enlightened. Some of you will be aware of the five Buddha mandala, for example, as a way of splitting up different aspects, looking at different aspects of enlightenment. Well, this division of the three family protectors actually predates that. It's actually probably the earliest, as far as I'm aware, of these ways of looking at different aspects of enlightenment, looking at the cognitive aspect, the emotional aspect, and the volitional aspect. As I've said, we've already looked at the cognitive aspect. We've been introduced to Manjusri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, the cognitive head knowledge aspect, if you like. We've looked at Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, embodying that warm, emotional aspect of enlightenment. And tonight, I'm going to introduce you to my friend, Vajra, representing the volitional strength, energy side of enlightenment. And the energy strength side, the side of our practice, which is about cultivating energy and what comes from energy, volition, energy, determination, strength, robustness in the face of difficulties. So Vajrapani, the name means holder of the Vajra, or wielder of the Vajra. And it seems like only yesterday I actually talked about Vajras, but I think it was a few months ago. Vajras are like this. They're one often translation is diamond thunderbolt. They're often translated into English as diamond thunderbolt. And they seem to have started life as a weapon, the ultimate weapon. They're a bit like Zeus's thunderbolt. So Zeus was quite fond of, in Western mythology, was quite fond of chucking his thunderbolt at people he didn't approve of, or smashing things to pieces that he didn't approve of with his thunderbolt. And I think the Vajra started out a bit like that. But it's the weapon which destroys anything, that cuts through anything. And it's a diamond thunderbolt. It's got qualities of both a thunderbolt and a diamond. So it's got qualities of a thunderbolt. Thunderbolts, lightning crashes, they just destroy. They knock anything out of their way. They wake us up. they wake us up in the night. They're very loud. They wake us up. There's a sudden illumination, even a slightly sort of shocking illumination. Suddenly everything was a bit grey, and then suddenly everything is immediately apparent. So it's got qualities of a thunderbolt. And it's also got qualities of a diamond. So diamonds will cut anything, but they can't be cut. They're the hardest thing known. They're indestructible. And if you look into a diamond, what you see is a world of incredible clarity, incredible cold clarity. So I think that diamond thunderbolt tells us a little bit about the properties of a Vajra. It's a symbol of energy and strength, a strength that bursts through obstacles, bursts through the obstacles that stop us, the inner obstacles that stop us growing, allows us to burst through the outer obstacles that stop us growing, to change the circumstances that are limiting us. It's got sort of implications of clarity, of revealing the clarity about things, like a diamond, like a lightning flash. So Vajrapani's name means literally wielder of the Vajra. So he's a bit scary, actually. He's a bit of a scary figure. And he crops up in the very earliest Buddhist writings. He crops up in the Pali Canon. He's there in the Pali Canon. There's stories about him in the Pali Canon. And he starts it's quite an interesting history, because he starts his life as what is called in Indian mythology a yaksha. He starts life as a yaksha. And yakshas are demonic, semi-demonic nature spirits bristling with fierce warrior energy. I'm not sure what the equivalent might be in Western mythology. I'm not sure we have one. When I was thinking about this, I thought of those that know the play Caliban in Shakespeare's Tempest. I thought of Caliban, but Caliban's pretty stupid, actually. And yakshas are anything but stupid. Certainly Vajrapani's not stupid. Perhaps the nature spirits that Christianity demonized and turned into devils and then sent to hell, maybe they are the equivalent of yakshas in their original undemonized form. Anyway, Vajrapani, he starts life as a yaksha, a semi-demonic, fierce warrior nature spirit. But then he hears the Buddha teach the Dharma. And he's converted. He's converted to the Dharma. He becomes devoted to the Buddha. He appoints himself as the Buddha's servant and protector. So if anyone messes with the Buddha, or with the Dharma or Sangha, they've got to reckon with Vajrapani, basically. If anyone threatens to undermine the Buddha, Dharma or Sangha, they have to reckon with Vajrapani. So what does he look like? Well, you might have got some ideas already. As I said, well, the image sort of develops. As I said, he's there in the Pali Canon. He's there in the Pali Canon. And there's a Pali Canon, Vajrapani, who's sort of a big, strong chap, but he's a bit smaller than the Buddha there. He appears to be about to knock the Buddha on the head, but I don't think that's what he's about, actually. And he's got a Vajra, seems to have a Vajra and a club. And in this image, which is a Western image by Alaka of the life of the Buddha, it's a sort of cartoon version of the life of the Buddha. We see Vajrapani down here looking out for the Buddha. Just don't mess with him, with his Vajra in his hand. It's quite like a diamond in this one. It's quite diamond-like. There he is. And he's sort of a big, strong chap. He's a big, strong chap with a big Vajra. And, you don't mess with him. But over time, as Buddhism sort of got more mythic, well, I don't know what happened to it, but anyway, it went to Tibet for one thing. And this is what Vajrapani transmogrified into in the tantric tradition. So he's huge. He's absolutely huge. He's surrounded by flames, like crackling energy. His hair's all standing on end, crackling with electric energy. He's striding forward, holding the Vajra, which has now become tiny in that hand, and stepping forward fiercely, with sort of skins and whatnot. And he's got 3 eyes, and he looks like you really don't want to get in his way. So that's the sort of tantric Vajrapani, this huge figure of immense strength, absolutely immense strength, able to just smash through anything. Immense energy, just sizzling with electric energy that makes his hair stand on end, makes him surrounded by flames. So as I've said, Vajrapani seems to have been around from the very earliest days of Buddhism, looking after the Buddha, protecting the Buddha. And there's, one story about him in the Pali Canon tells us about, his encounter with an arrogant the Buddha's, how Vajrapani crops up when the Buddha encounters an arrogant young Brahmin who wants to put him down, basically. So the story starts with the Buddha and his followers staying at a Brahmin village, in the village of Kosala, in a village in the kingdom of Kosala called Ikarakala. And there's a rich estate just outside that village where there's a rich and powerful and famous Brahmin called Pokarasadi. And this Pokarasadi, he'd heard that the Buddha was staying nearby. And he'd heard a lot of really favourable reports about him. So he decided to send his one of his senior followers to check the Buddha out, to see what the Buddha was like. So he asked this young man called Ambata, and he says, now go there, dear Ambata, go to this wanderer, go to her, and find out whether his reputation is true or not. So Ambata sets out to do what his teacher asked him to do. But he doesn't just go and stroll along on foot to see the Buddha. I mean, Ambata wants to go in real style. So he gathers together a retinue of other young Brahmins, and they're all on horseback. But Ambata travels in a huge chariot, a very rich chariot drawn by 4 horses. And this tells us a lot about Ambata. For a start, he's a high-status social leader. If he goes anywhere, he can gather a retinue of young followers to come with him as his attendants. He's a bit like a petty king travelling with a court. And secondly, while all the other young men go on horseback, which immediately puts them, as it were, above figures like the Buddha who walk around on foot, Ambata goes in a chariot, a great chariot. He puts himself above all the others. He puts his followers above the Buddha, and he puts himself above his followers. But as we've heard, the Buddha was staying in the forest. The Buddha always stayed in the forest. The Buddha was staying in the forest, and chariots don't work very well in forests, actually. So quite soon in the journey, Ambata had to get down out of his chariot. And his followers had to get off their horses, and they all had to walk, which didn't please Ambata one little bit. He wasn't very pleased about this at all. Ambata's chariot seems to symbolise the fact that he thinks of himself as very special, so special that he's above the Buddha that he's going to see. So he has to get down off his chariot that makes him so special. And walk like everybody else. And he doesn't like that. And then Ambata and his followers, all richly dressed and everything, are shown into a makeshift little hut where the Buddha's staying. And what the sutta says is the other young Brahmins exchanged polite and courteous greetings with the Buddha and took their seats, but Ambata greeted the Buddha in an offhand way and stayed standing up, walking about and fidgeting while the Buddha sat. And the Buddha said to him, "Is this the way, Ambata, that you hold discussion with aged teachers and the teachers of your teachers who are well advanced in years?" And Ambata replied, "Certainly not, Gautama. It is proper to speak with a Brahmin standing if he is standing, or seated if he is seated, or reclining if he is reclining, but with shaveling beggars, sham friars and menial blackfellows, who are like the dirt on the feet of our noble family, with them I talk as I do to you now." That's hugely insulting. It's hugely insulting. But the Buddha is above. He's above being insulted. And he says, he stays unfailingly polite. He says, "But you must have been wanting something, Ambata, when you came here. Remember what you came here for, or I will think of you, this young Brahmin is ill-bred," although he prides himself on his breeding. And the sutta tells us that Ambata was displeased and angry that the Buddha had called him rude. So he spoke to the Buddha in a scoffing and jeering way, saying, "You Shakyans are a rough bunch, Gautama, rude and touchy and violent, a clan of low-life menials who do not honour your betters." The Buddha's still polite. He says, "Have the Shakyans offended you in some way, Ambata?" And Ambata replies, "Once, Gautama, I had to go to capital Vastu on some business, and I went into the Shakyans' meeting hall, and there were a number of Shakyans there seated in the hall on grand seats, making merry and joking together, and I think it was me that they were joking at." Well, given Ambata's attitude, that's probably not particularly surprising. We can probably imagine the scene. Anyway, by this time, the Buddha has got Ambata's number. And what the sutta says is that the Buddha thought, this Ambata is very set on humbling others. I would do him a favour if I were to humble him. I would do him a favour if I would humble him. Ambata has got off his chariot in the physical sense, but he hasn't got off his chariot in a sort of archetypal sense, if you like. He's still setting himself above everybody, above the Buddha, completely deluded, completely cut off from reality. And he's going to carry on being a stupid, laughable fool until he puts himself on the proper level. So the Buddha thinks, I would do him a favour if I were to humble him. The Buddha is going to do him a favour, but not one that Ambata is likely to welcome, actually. The Buddha is always unfailingly polite, but he's a formidable person. You don't mess with him. And he starts off by asking Ambata a simple question. What's the name of your family, Ambata? And Ambata replies, proudly, I'm a Kanayana. Presumably there's a noble family. And the Buddha's already got him when he says that, because the Buddha knows that the Kanayamas descended from a Shakyan slave girl. They used to be servants of the Shakyans. So the Buddha says to him, in which case, Ambata, if you follow up your ancient name and lineage, you will know that the Shakyans were once your masters, and that you're descended from a Shakyan slave girl. Isn't that true, Ambata? And Ambata refuses to answer. So the Buddha asks it again. Ambata refuses to answer again. So the Buddha asks it again, and Ambata refuses to answer again. And suddenly something happens. Suddenly Vajrapani appears. So suddenly Ambata sees the terrifying figure of Vajrapani towering over the Buddha's head, towering behind the Buddha and towering over him, with a huge Vajra in his hand, surrounded by flames, fiery, dazzling, full of energy, and about to split his head into 3 pieces with his Vajra. Only the Buddha and Ambata can see this terrifying figure. And Ambata is terrified, so he cowers down by the Buddha, grabbing the Buddha's cloak, grabbing the Buddha's clothes and saying, "Please save me, Buddha, save me." And he cries out, "Is it just as the Venerable Gautama has said?" That is the origin of the Kanayanas. And then the sutta tells us that all the young Brahmins who'd come along, the entourage, they all rolled about laughing, saying, "Ha ha ha, Ambata, who's also so high and mighty, is descended from a Shakyamuni slave girl, ha ha ha." At which the Buddha tells them off and says, "Don't be so stupid." Basically tells them that this idea of social status is really stupid, and that they're being stupid for laughing. And indeed praises Ambata's family as being, as he says, descended from a mighty seer. So, the Vajrapani in the story seems to represent the aspect of the Buddha that you don't mess with, basically. He is the Buddha's very own yaksha, there if he needs him. The Buddha is always unfailingly kind. The Buddha is always unfailingly kind and polite, but he's not always nice. Some people really don't like him. He criticised elements of the society at the time. He opposed the caste system. He criticised the spiritual pretensions of the Brahmin caste, who had held themselves to be spiritually superior on account of birth rather than spiritual attainment or practice. So he annoyed a lot of people. He didn't back down. He stuck to his guns, he stuck to his principles, and annoyed people. Because being kind and being nice are not the same things, actually. Being nice is about having people like us. And if we want everyone to think we're nice, we often have to let go of our principles. We often have to do what they want us to do, even if we don't, even if they're against our agendas, even if we think they're wrong. We have to let go of our priorities, do what other people want us to do. In the story, the Buddha was unfailingly polite to Ambata, until the point came where being polite wouldn't be kind anymore, actually, where Ambata needed to grow. He says he thinks Ambata is very set on humbling others. It would do him a favour if I were to humble him. So to continue to allow Ambata to be the silly little boy that he is would be very unkind spiritually. The Buddha did him a huge spiritual favour, bringing him back to reality, although Ambata probably didn't find that very pleasant. So, I've already said, Vajrapani appears. Vajrapani appears as almost like an aspect of the Buddha, a protecting aspect of the Buddha. And I've already said that yakshas are nature spirits. They're fierce nature spirits, bristling with energy. They're nature spirits. They're wild. They're not tame. They're wild. They represent a wild natural energy. And this is a wild natural energy that we all have, which is part of us and which needs to be part of us. We are all, as it were, a marriage between a civilized and polite and cultured human being and a wild animal. That wild animal is still there. The wild animal on its own, without the controlling influence of the civilized human being, would be demonic and destructive. It belongs to a lower realm of existence. But the civilized human being on its own, without the energy and vigour of the wild animal, without the yaksha energy would be pale and weak and ineffectual. Always looking for safety, always looking for approval, always looking for comfort, always trying to be nice. So we need this marriage to happen, actually. We need to not be either one or the other. We need our inner yaksha. We need it serving us and giving us energy, just as Vajrapani served the Buddha. We need to integrate that wild animal energy of our inner yaksha, get it on our side, serving us. So I'm sure you remember that in our intermediate course, we talk about us human beings as being rather like a horse and a rider. So we talk about the fact that we're a horse and a rider, the rider being the, if you like, the nice civilized bit, the rational bit, and the horse being those deep energies, those animal energies, if you like. And we talk about how very often the rider thinks they're going over there, and the horse is going firmly over there. And the need for the rider, that's the people we think we are, to actually make friends with the horse, be able to talk with the horse, get the horse taking us where we wish to go. And really, in a way, I think what I'm saying about integrating our yaksha is saying the same thing, actually. It's saying the same thing, although it's maybe saying it in a slightly more extreme and mythic way. We need to integrate our wild animal energy, that wild animal which is part of us, to be a complete and effective being. And if we're not a complete and effective being, we're certainly not going to become an enlightened being. So, yeah, in a truly integrated being, I mean, the Buddha was obviously more than integrated, but in a truly integrated being, that wild animal energy is at the fingertips of the higher self, as it were. It's controlled, it's kind, it's refined. But, as the young Brahmin discovered, it's still there. It's still there when it's needed. And actually, we've got lots of symbols of this integration of the higher human with the wild animal in our culture as well, actually, in the form of mythic figures that are half human, half animal. You can probably think of quite a few. I've got things like the manticore and the sphinx and so on, but probably the most obvious is the centaur, which is partly a powerful horse with a human trunk and a human head. This is a symbol of what we can be like if the horse and the rider become truly one being, serving the aims of the higher self. And of course, centaurs are usually depicted in mythology not just as strong, but also as noble and wise, and indeed kind. To be really kind, we also need to be strong. And to be strong, we do have to have our animal energy working for us. It's very hard to be kind if we feel weak and threatened, actually. If we feel weak and threatened and vulnerable, we focus on ourselves, not on other people. So that maybe is a bit of a symbol of what an integrated human being is like, someone who's integrated the wild energy of their inner yaksha, someone who's unified their horse and their human, if you like. And of course, the Buddha is a fully integrated being. He's gone beyond being a fully integrated human being. He's gone beyond that category. He's in a different category altogether. In fact, he's gone beyond any category altogether. But he is certainly someone who's integrated their inner yaksha. He has Vajrapani at his service, served by his inner yaksha. And the image of the kindly Buddha sitting there being polite and kind to this awful, horrible youth, but with this huge energy of Vajrapani behind him, towering behind him. I think that's, when necessary, I think that's quite a good image of that integration. And of course, there are many, many other images and myths that bring us out within our culture, but also in bringing out aspects of the Buddha that are like that in the Buddhist tradition. So, for one, is a story of Muchalinda. A few more Vajrapanis before we start. Get on to that in a minute. So, the story of Muchalinda. So the story of Muchalinda, which some of you will have heard of, happens shortly after the Buddha's enlightenment. And we're told that the Buddha was enlightened, and he was sitting in the open meditating when there was a terrific storm. Maybe the monsoon came, it was a terrific storm. And this huge creature appears, a Naga. He's a Naga in Indian mythology. Nagas are like serpents, they're like dragons, but they've got a sort of human quality to them. And this is, I think it's a 7-headed Naga, although this one seems to have only one head. Anyway, what this Naga does is he coils himself around the Buddha and opens his hood, like a cobra's hood, over the Buddha's head to shelter the Buddha. And there's many, many images of this in Buddhist art. Some of them he's sitting on the Naga, some of them the Naga's this huge serpent, this huge powerful serpent is wound around the Buddha in all sorts of ways. Oops, the end. Others is towering, and at the same time towering over him, protecting him, looking really quite fierce and scary. Once again, a really powerful image, I think, of strength, power, wild energy in service of something higher, in service of something higher. This image of the Buddha protected by the forces of nature, including his own transformed animal nature, protecting him, giving him strength. And at the very end of this story, actually, when the rains stop, Muchalinda, the Naga king, actually transforms. He transforms into a beautiful, handsome young man who bows graciously to the Buddha and offers him his service. So at the end of the story, we're as it were shown the two sides of the Naga, the two sides of this wild energy devoted to the Buddha. On the one hand, the Naga is a creature of great strength and energy, frightening and dangerous. On the other hand, when he's devoted to the Buddha, he's transformed into a beautiful, courteous young man. But of course, all that Naga energy is still there if he needs it. So, one part of becoming more like an enlightened being. You know, we've looked at the head, and obviously, maybe that's obvious we need to develop wisdom. We've looked at the heart, maybe it's obvious we need to develop compassion, metta, joy, shraddha. But one part of it is to mobilize our full energy, And that involves getting our wild animal on our side, getting our wild yaksha energy on our side, serving our cause and protecting us. We need Vajrapani on our side. And Vajrapani is the king of the yakshas. We need to get our own Vajrapani on our side, our own yaksha. So how do we do that? How do we go about doing that to round up? Well, we're going to spend quite a few weeks talking about that, so keep coming. We're going to spend quite a few weeks going into aspects of how do we get our energies really behind us? How do we mobilise our energies? How do we find out what we love and really go for it? But tonight I'm just going to cover a few things related to the sort of mythic approach that I've been taking this evening, looking at Vajrapani. How do we get our yaksha on our side? How do we get our energy at our service? Well, I think one way might be to invoke Vajrapani. Chant the mantra. Chant the mantra when things get tough. Chant the mantra. When you want to go into that really difficult situation, chant the mantra. Just feel some of that. You might think this is bonkers. You might think, oh, Vadanya. Don't knock it until you've tried it a bit, actually. Don't knock it until you've tried it. You might be surprised. Get in touch with Vajrapani. That's one way. But another thing about this, I think we should probably consider the story of Vajrapani. How did the Buddha get Vajrapani, as it were, on his side? How did Vajrapani stop being a rough old yaksha and become a Dharma protector, a Buddha protector, a Sangha protector? How did he become the Buddhist protector? Well, what happened is that Vajrapani was wild, demonic, fierce, nature spirit. Then he heard the Buddha teach the Dharma. He was offered a vision of something higher. He was offered a glimpse of something higher. And this touched something deep in him. He saw, in a way, that the Buddha was worthy of respect. So he gave him his loyalty and allegiance and service, vowed to protect him, vowed to use his wild yaksha energy to fight for Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, rather than creating mischief and warfare. The Buddha showed him a higher dimension of being. He saw that the Buddha was a higher being, worthy of respect, worthy of reverence and service, so he put himself at his service. And if we want to gain the respect and loyalty and service of our inner yaksha, we also need to offer it something higher, a higher vision, something worthy, something that we'll see as worthy of respect. If we are living a life that our, if you like, inner yaksha thinks, God, that's boring, or that's meaningless, or, oh, well, it's not going to be remotely interested. If our life is about, what might it be about? Financial security, progress up through some middle management hierarchy, safety, getting loads of trivial pleasures. Vajrapani, at best, he's going to be fast asleep. At worst, he's going to be throwing a Vajra into the works every now and then, so that things go badly wrong, in the hope that we'll do something different. If we want to get our inner yaksha on our side, we need to live a meaningful life, a life that is serving something higher than our own wants and anxieties and fears, and we need to do that with some courage and some conviction. Vajrapani needs to be given something that he can respect, or our inner yaksha, if you like, needs to be given something that he can respect in order to serve it. And then our inner yaksha may begin to respect us and bless us. And when our yaksha blesses us, when that wild animal energy sort of comes into line and blesses us, well, various things happen. I'll give you an example of the sort of things that happen from a traditional text, actually, a traditional text that talks about the blessing of the yakshas. So this is from a Mahayana sutra called the Sutra of Golden Light, in which a number of figures bless. Well, in the sutra, they're really blessing the Dharma teacher, but you could see it as blessing any Dharma practitioner, anyone that they see as worthy of respect. And in this, Vajrapani says, I and my fellow yaksha generals will go wherever we hear this Dharma Protect whoever teaches this Dharma. Protect whoever practices this Dharma. Defend and help them and deliver them from danger. We will inject strength into the roots of their hair. We will inject strength into the roots of their hair. We will produce great energy in their body. We will fill them with vigor and prowess, so that their body will not be weary, so that their body may have happy senses, so that they may be full of joy, so that the Dharma may long go forth in this world, so that beings may become wise, so that they may heap up a great mass of merit, and so that they may one day wake up to supreme enlightenment.